Well, good evening, everybody, or good day, everybody. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I am the Reverend Dr. Clifford Matthews Jr., the pastor of the St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you so much for joining in with me for Bible study today. Uh, we are coming live, and for us on the East Coast, it is 7 p.m. I'm not sure where you are, whether you're watching us live or you're watching it um, uh, later, whatever, however, I'm just glad that you're here. If you're watching us live or if you are watching it later, please take a few moments and share this link and invite someone to join you for study today. Don't forget, I welcome your questions, your comments. The interaction is so important to having an effective Bible study. I do appreciate that we are taking a deeper dive and we are tilling ground that may not be traditional Bible study for some, but it's necessary. It's necessary, and we're going to keep on doing this kind of study. So I want to say thanks again for joining us. And the goal is to really help us to think theologically, to think better, to think not just as Christians, but to think as thinking individuals that are also attuned to the world in which we live, right? God is the God of truth, and the truth of God in theology is the truth of God in psychology, sociology, science, and medicine. All of that is important. So I want you to know that's the frame from which we work. Thank y'all for coming in. I see you now. I can't say hi to everybody, but I do see your presence, and I am so thankful for it. You can watch us here on Facebook, or you can go over to our YouTube channel. Either one is fine. Just know your presence is appreciated. Also, I want you just to know that this is our last Bible study session until after the week. So we are having Holy Week services next week with noonday devotions, right? And then we will have a week off. So the week following Easter Wednesday, I guess you'll say, we're not having Bible study. We'll come back to Bible study the second week of April. So enjoy that little break. For me, I'm going to enjoy some time with the family, but we'll come back. And thank you for that. Don't forget our community standard. We want you to share. We want you to talk and dialogue, but let's respect each other's right to disagree sometimes, and let's just keep it moving. So thanks again for your presence here, and let's get started tonight. This is our last session in this series on towards a whole body theology, integrating Black spirituality and sexuality. Thank y'all again for staying with us. This is our last session. Session 5, we're going to look at something that I know you may be asking why, but I'll explain in a minute. HIV/AIDS and Black sexuality, moving beyond stigma. We're going to look tonight in this last session at the impacts of HIV/AIDS upon Black body identity, upon Black body sexuality, upon really how we see ourselves and how we relate to each other, right? This is an important topic, and I thank y'all for allowing me the opportunity to add my 2 cents to it as we go forward. So this first slide that we're going to come to is going to give us where we have been. I do this because maybe you're watching us for the first time and you need to know, maybe get a recap. I'm not going to stay here long, but you will see that we began by talking about the cultural importance of this study, answering the why. And we answered the why by saying that when you examine issues around healthcare disparities, or I would say the social determinants of health, when you realize and you see that within the Black community, in our community, we are often diagnosed with things too late. We do not often access healthcare. Even when we have access, we don't utilize it. And I am suggesting that that's part of a legacy that relates to the issue of how we have devalued in some ways the body and overemphasized those things of the spirit, right? And so we want to really do a good job, and we want to focus our understanding on why it is important that we integrate Black body sexuality and spirituality, right? We also looked at the issue around what is whole body theology. We defined whole body theology. I'm not going to take time to go over all of that, but it's not about sex necessarily. Whole body theology is about recognizing that at the end of the day, we do not just have a body, but we are a body. And again, all of our praise, all of our worship flows from a body, right? So that's what we're looking at when we talk about a whole body theology. We also want to focus our attention, and we've already gone there, about the sexualized trauma of Black bodies. We'll hit on this a little bit again tonight, but there is a legacy that continues within our DNA, I want to say, our collective DNA. It's called trauma. And we talked about this whole issue of collective traumatization, intergenerational traumatization, and how that continues to impact us, right? We looked at this issue of wholeness as an integration and how we come to that place. We examined it from John chapter 5 when Jesus asked the brother, "Wilt thou be made whole?" We examined it from that point. We looked at the philosophical underpinnings of a dualism that we inherited, and that dualism comes from Platonic and Neoplatonic philosophical thought that minimize the seen, maximize the unseen. And part of that was given to us and inherited when we picked up uh, the evangelical framing of religion during the Great Awakening in America versus the first and the second one. Dualism and Black body disassociation, right? We are saying that because of the trauma we have experienced, it is so easy for us to disassociate from our bodies, to actually have something growing in our bodies, something happening in our bodies, and we're just not aware because we have been so used to minimizing the body because of the trauma we have experienced. We looked at the incarnation as a validation of the body. Jesus came in body. Because Jesus came in body, it testifies, it validates that the body is important. God could have very easily sent forth a spirit, but God sent body. God sent a human body that felt like we felt, was tempted like we were tempted, that endured like we endure. And so that validates the body matters to God. And last week we looked at the legacy of the legacy of Black self-esteem, its legacy and its impact and its way forward. Thank you for the comments on that study from last week. I talked to folk who I didn't even know watch the broadcast who gave me some good comments, and I really do appreciate that. What we argued there is that basically we do not value ourselves. We struggle to value ourselves, and that is something that does impact our ability to connect with others and also to connect with ourselves, right? And so that's where we have been. Now, tonight, we're looking at the issue of HIV and AIDS and its impact on Black sexuality, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we talking about this? I'm glad you asked, right? We're talking about this because HIV and AIDS and its impact is something that Black bodies deal with on a daily basis. We'll talk about the numbers in a little bit, but this is something that is a real thing. This isn't alternative facts. This is a real thing that impacts Black bodies and Black community. And it is something that as quiet as it's kept, and we're going to talk about that tonight, as quiet as it's kept, HIV and AIDS is a very present thing whenever Black bodies gather. Church, work, social functions, HIV is a present reality, right? We're talking about this because people are fighting with acceptance. And it's twofold, or maybe three. The acceptance, of course, comes from the fact that people struggle to accept that they have this disease. They have this they have this infection, right? Uh, they struggle with accepting that, right? Because of a lot of reasons. We'll talk about some of that, but there's a struggle to accept it. But just like everything else, acceptance is the first step of being better. If you can't accept where you are, if you can't accept the now, it's hard to think about a going towards the then, right? You just go around in circles because acceptance basically is what we need to give ourselves to move ourselves forward, right? And also acceptance is something that is dealt with within the family. And the family could be the biological family, but I also want to include that now in our broader family called the church, right? It is a thing that we still struggle with to give folk acceptance, right? To basically validate people no matter where they are, and to recognize that a family member, biological or church member, this is their reality, their story, and it matters, right? And so we struggle with acceptance. That's why we're doing this study, right? And I want you to walk with me tonight. We're going to get some Bible in here, and I want to begin first by looking at how do we do theological reflection around HIV and AIDS, right? To be clear, HIV and AIDS was not a part of the biblical writer's world. This is a relatively new a disorder or condition, the early 80s. So it wasn't part of the biblical writer's world. So how do we reflect and think about our God response? How do we theologically embrace this reality? And I want to suggest that we've done several things, and you'll probably pick up on some of these. We have gone to the Bible and we have allowed the Bible to help us put some kind of narrative around the painful, the hard to accept, the difficult, the unimaginable, right? And so one such text that has been used that I want us to look at is in the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah chapter 8, verses 18 through 22. I want to read that to you tonight from the New Revised Standard Version. And I want us to hear the words of the prophet. My joy is gone, grief is upon me, my heart is sick. Hark, the cry of my poor people from far and wide in the land. Is the Lord not in Zion? Is her king not in her? Why have they provoked me to anger with their images, with their foreign idols? The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. For the hurt of my people, I am hurt. I mourn, and dismay has taken hold of me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of my poor people not been restored. You could see how this narrative provided a good way to look at how we process the impact theologically of HIV and AIDS. The prophet Jeremiah, known by some as the weeping prophet, was among his people and was in dismay at the condition his people were experiencing, right? The prophet raises the question that was perhaps, and it was voiced upon their lips, right? Where is God? Has God forgotten Zion? Has God abandoned Zion? Now, the prophet is clear that some of this feeling is related to Israel's failure to turn to God. But what the prophet is sensing is there is this disconnect. There is a sense of having faith in God, but yet God is not present. There's so much going on. Has God abandoned Zion? You know, has God left us? And the prophet laments the fact, and it is a lament. The prophet laments the reality for the prophet that it's past time. Things should have changed. The harvest, is it? Summer's here. So harvest is ended. Why haven't things changed? There is this sense that God, we have been in this a long time. Where are you? I want you to know this particular narrative was a narrative that when we did try to wrap our heads around HIV and AIDS, this narrative was one that we grabbed hold of, right? Is there no healing in the land? Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there nothing that can be given that can heal and restore the hopes of Zion, right? Or the hopes of God's people, right? So that's the question given to us by the prophet Jeremiah in this particular chapter. This phrase, balm in Gilead, you would probably know is the name of a well-known advocacy group that really helped the Black church move forward. It's called the Balm in Gilead, right? It gathered folk together early on in this crisis to say, hey, we've got to do some work around this, right? Okay. Now, when you look at that, I want us to then look at Leviticus chapters 13 and 14. Now, I can't read all of this, right? But what I want to do is to encourage you when you have a chance to read it. Leviticus, of course, is a book that prescribes how God's people were to come before God, how they were to practice ritual cleanliness or purity, how they were to present themselves before a holy God, right? In chapters 13 and 14, the narrator or narrators of Leviticus give us the reality that we need to not forget. And that is that from the time people have had faith in God, people have had to wrestle with faith plus life showing up, right? So the prophet or the narrator of Leviticus gives us the reality that there comes a time when there is some physical discomfort, some physical ailment. In 13 and 14, it had to do with skin diseases. Some would say leprosy, right? What happens when Israel, when the worshiping community finds itself dealing with something that is unusual, something that can spread, something that can be detrimental, not just to the individual, but to more of the community, right? So I want to say that, and I don't want to belabor this point, but I want us never to forget that the biblical writers were human. And there was never a time when humans, in reflecting on God and doing theological work, did not have to deal with life. I think sometimes that we think if we have faith and we trust God, that we can alter life, that life won't show up. No, you can have faith in God and trust God and still get a horrible diagnosis. And it's not that you have done wrong. It's not that you're evil. It's not that you made a mistake. So stop doing that. It is life, right? That there are things that happen in this world that we are not immune from, right? We have not been exempt from life. So the writers of the Bible know that people go through. Leviticus 13 and 14 deals with what do you do with someone, male or female, has a skin disorder within the tribe. Now, here's where I want to say that we did frame early on in the crisis of HIV/AIDS, we did frame it from a standpoint of leprosy. How we are to react to folk within the community is the same way, I'll be clear, that biblical folk did when it came to leprosy. And so it'd be good for us if we could say that if we take that understanding of looking at HIV/AIDS from a lens of leprosy, that we, like Jesus, understood the need to touch folk where they are, to be among folk. That'd be really, really, really spiritual. But the reality of it is, we are much more like, and have been much more like, the Old Testament writers in Leviticus 13 and 14, that when we understood HIV/AIDS as something which could be spread, what we did, get this now, we practiced some distance. We practiced what I'm calling in the slide here religiously sanctioned othering. In other words, we were able to say to folk that had this, had HIV/AIDS, we were able to say, you're different from the rest of us. And that othering allowed for us to do some things that we didn't necessarily have to feel bad about. Because at the end of the day, once you have othered someone or othered a group, you're no longer on the hook for your best behavior. Once they are othered, you just do what you feel you can do, you should do. And so early on, we othered folk, and instead of being the hands and the arms and the feet of Jesus, we othered folk, and we said basically, stay away. Right? Now, you don't have to believe that. Just go back and look at it. If you're old enough, if you were of any age in the 1980s when HIV hit the scene, you remember vividly how it was. You remember vividly how it was, right? And so one of the things that I want to stress here is that there is a tendency among religious folk to find it altogether too comfortable to other persons or groups, right? And in some way, we're going to show it tonight, we are still in some ways othering people, right? And we want to talk about how we get past that othering and how we move from othering to us, how it's not us and them, but it's us. We are all one community, right? So that's what, if we reflect theologically, we understand the passionate desire of people of God to see God bring healing in this epidemic, this pandemic. But we also have to be clear and real about the fact that HIV/AIDS has given us the opportunity to other, to push people away, and to separate from them. All right. And so we want to talk about now this next slide that I want to really focus on. I hope you all will walk with me is HIV and AIDS. And I put fragility, body and community. It's fragility in the body and community. I want you to take a moment and I want you to go back in time and I want you to think about, especially if you were a teenager in 1981, right? You get this. If you were not, let's say that you are a Gen Z, you were born in the late 1990s or early 2000s, whatever that group is, you may not understand this. It could be a different reality, right? But if you have any age on you, I want you just to think back to when you first heard about the virus or about HIV and AIDS. Just think about that. When was the first time you heard about that? I can recall to this day the first time I heard about it. It was 1982. I was at the Castle Air Force Base in Merced or Atwater, California. I was a personnel clerk, get this, and I was in the office of First Lieutenant Casey. She was a female first lieutenant or first lieutenant who was my supervisor. I went into her office because I had been called there, and on the radio, she was playing something from National Public Radio, and it was talking about this new unnamed thing that is running rampant within the queer community of San Francisco. And I listened. That's the first time. I want to ask you to think to send me your first time hearing about it. But I could tell you, I never will forget that day because immediately there was this fear, right? Because the way it was described, it was fearful, almost as if the first time we heard about COVID and we started seeing all the body bags and all the deaths, it was scary, right? This happened in the early 1980s. I'm not going to go down through how it started and all of that. We're not going to do that. But what I want to emphasize in this slide is in the 1980s, you were having this major economic shift that was beginning around this issue of globalization. It already started, but it was really going on now. It was picking up, right? You are already seeing a downturn in manufacturing. You're already seeing how the world economy was shifting more towards the haves and not the have-nots. You saw that having an impact within urban areas and Black communities. Yeah. You started, yeah, thanks, Deborah. You started seeing it was impacting the Black community, this globalization, this shift of economic resources. And this happened at a time when not only was HIV coming on the scene, but get this now, HIV and AIDS rode on the back of Ronald Reagan's war on drugs. Get this now, that was a racialized program that targeted Black communities to turn Black folk or to frame Black folk in urban areas as drug addicts, thugs, violent, and it was that crack epidemic that allowed for the continued marginalization of Black bodies that still was dealing with the legacy of black body disrespect, right? So we were coming out of that era where we were degraded with the say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. There was this black power movement. There was this move towards, engaging in broader society, right? And then it became an issue that crack came on the scene, and crack became a black issue, huh? And when crack became a black issue, right, you begin to find communities that were impacted that looked like us. And so in those environments where there was economic despair, where there was a legacy of black body disrespect, where there was this issue of the criminalization and the racialization of drug addiction, there became a rampant spread of HIV. It was spread how? Through needles, through bodily fluid, through needles, through sexual activity. I want to suggest to you that what the black community experienced in the early 80s with this was like a tsunami of, it was so much. And I want to suggest to you that when 1,000 years from now, somebody writes about the black community, it's going to write about how HIV that came on the back of the criminalization and racialization of the war on drugs, how that was a devastating reality for the black community. The black family was already struggling. And now here comes all of this now, right? And to make matters worse, we know from our study that the one thing black folk have a hard time doing, we have a hard time talking about anything sexual, because it only brings up that which is hidden deep or buried deep in our collective memory, that whenever we make our black bodies the center of attention, it doesn't end well for us, that our black bodies are a problem. So we have been stigmatized, we keep it down. And so here we have now this disease spreading through the community. And the one institution that we look to really help us deal with it was the black church, and it wasn't able to deal. Come on, talk to me now. It just wasn't able to deal. It could not handle it. It was as if, and I want to make this point plain. I want to suggest, and I don't have any evidence for this. I can't say it's research based. I would say it's gut level anecdotal. I believe one of the reasons why there was such an embrace of a prosperity gospel in the 80s is that the reason there was such an embrace by the black community of a prosperity gospel in the early 80s was because the reality of pain the black community was experiencing was too much, and to have to dealing with black body issues around HIV and AIDS and sexuality and queer identity was too much. And so what we did was we escaped to talk about, if you put your seed on the altar, God gonna bless you. We start talking about prosperity because prosperity was a way for us to escape, right? And the sad thing is, while we were having church, our sons, our grandsons, our fathers, our mothers, our daughters, our aunties, our uncles, our best friends were dying. And they were dying stigmatized, and you couldn't even talk about it. I done got excited. I don't know why, but it was just that reality. When I think about growing up in Riviera Beach on 14th Street in my community, Federal Gardens, if I think about the folk that I played with growing up on my street, I can tell you if I stood at my front door and I went across the street and went down about 5 houses, there were 2 deaths there from HIV. When I go right next door on our side of the street, there was a death from HIV, AIDS. When I go down the road to some real good friends of mine that I played with, brothers and a sister died of HIV. And nobody really talked about it because of the stigma around it. And the Black church didn't know what to do with it, right? And so what the results were, and I don't want to give numbers. My time, I got my 20 minutes left. I don't want to give numbers. I'm gonna get in trouble now, but someone today told me this was going to happen, and I needed to do part 2 of this because this is going to be good, Pastor, and you need to not try to rush and get it all done in one session. And I told them to be quiet because I'm gonna finish this tonight, this series, but I may not get to finish it tonight. And I want to say, okay, so you were right. Okay, big deal. All right. So I heard you. Okay. Okay. All right. But I'm going to try nevertheless. Okay. You got it right this time. But this is true now that the Black church. So what are those numbers, right? Look at the numbers. 75 million people have died of AIDS, have been infected with AIDS worldwide. 32.7 million people have died. In the sub-Saharan and the African continent, in the sub-Saharan area, last year, 2022, there was over 400,000 deaths from AIDS. Now, in 2021, 40% of all new HIV infections, reported infections, were from the Black community. 40% of new infections from our community, but Black community is only 13% of the America's population. You see that disproportionality there? We are 13% population-wise, but we make up 40% of new cases, right? Now, 70% of those new cases come from what they call from men having sex with men or men who have sex with men, MSMs, right? 70%, right? And 27% come from heterosexual contact. Now, I don't know the numbers, but it could be that the heterosexual contact could be because someone was DL or down low and was, bisexual, unprotected, whatever. And there was this reality that there was this infection, right? And so that's where we are. Now, I raise this point because I want to be clear. There is a thought that HIV and AIDS is a thing of the past. I want to be clear, and it's going to be painful to say. It is a thing of the past if you're non-Black or if you're white. This continues to be a problem in the Black and brown community. While Latinos fare better as far as their numbers, there is the fact that if you're Black or brown in America, that HIV and AIDS is still a problem. Now, there is the reality also of medical breakthroughs, and we're going to look at it. We come down to stigma. We'll look at the stigma involved, and you do see there is a correlation between the number drop and younger folk. That there is more of a there's more self-awareness among younger individuals than individuals who are older. What I'm saying is, it seems to indicate there has been some level of destigmatization that is occurring among young folk. Yes, young queer folk that understand, I'm okay. But there still is this issue. Even in Mecklenburg County, we lead when it comes to new cases, and Black bodies are still dying from HIV and AIDS. Still happening, right? Right? It is still happening. You're right. It is still happening. It is not it is not going away, right? And so part of why we have to talk about sexuality is because that disproportionality that we are talking about is linked to how we do not understand our bodies. We don't value the legacy of trauma Black bodies have experienced. Makes it hard for us to embrace ourselves, to be in healthy relationship outside of ourselves. We take too many risks because we don't really value who we are. It's not a judgment, it's the fact, right? That we need to break this thing down. And I want to be clear with you, right? That if you do, okay, all right. If you read the book, it's called Sweet Tea, and it's a book that really chronicles Black gay reality, primarily in the South. There's a whole section in that book that makes plain there isn't, you're not having folk who are unchurched getting infected. You have folk in church who are in church, but who have not been able to get to a place where they can be themselves and to still feel the community's love, that there is this quietness, this hiding out, right? And so it only breeds this kind of stigma. So listen, I'm at the 48-minute mark, and I won't get through all of this tonight. So I'm gonna come back to this. Pastor, why don't you keep going? Because if I keep going, I won't do a good job. I will tell you there's so much to get done. The next time we come together, thank you, Deborah. Fear and shame, absolutely. And I won't just say that, Deborah. Thank you, sister. Fear and shame, right? That when you remember how I told y'all that how white society labeled us and they called us monkeys or whatever, right? And they made us just like beasts, wild animals, right? And I told you how we internalized that. And instead of rejecting it, we brought it into ourselves and we tried to then outlive their narrative to be the better person. It's called respectability. We picked up a desire to be respectable, right? But it was based upon, in some ways, an internalization of what they said. We got to show them we are not the animals they say that we are, right? Now, I want to say that is shame producing. Yeah. When you internalize somebody else's negative image of who you are, it can't help but result in shame. Because at some point, believing the narrative or embracing the narrative, massaging the narrative, all it does is bring up this sense that, you know what? I'm not good enough. And so instead of being your own advocate for yourself, what happened is I just don't, I got something going on. I don't feel right. I got this rash. I don't know. And we just don't go because we'll rather try some herbal remedy. We'll try some, come on, talk to me now. We'll try apple cider vinegar and aloe vera because at least I don't have to go anywhere and tell somebody I think I got this. Right? And all that does is when we finally, and this is a stat I want to tell you, and I'll quote the article next week, but not next week, the week after, we'll wrap it up. Okay. But I want to say that when we do get diagnosed, when Black bodies get diagnosed with HIV or AIDS, get this now. Normally, we are further along than white counterparts. It's just like colon cancer. When we finally get around to checking our colons, we're already stage 3. When we finally get ready to get our prostates checked, we're already stage 3. We don't go when we feel the little discomfort. Even if we have access, we don't utilize it. I think it's all about this right here. Well, listen, so I hear you, Barbara. Over-the-counter meds. Yeah, over-the-counter meds can't get rid of this. Yeah, it won't get rid of it. Yeah, Barbara, Deborah, you're right. At this point, when we finally get to the medical professional, and I don't want to get into anybody's business, but we know folk like that, who we knew, who we loved, who are no longer here. When they finally got to help and went to somebody, it was already late. And now you're climbing out of the hole that could have been just a slide over. Because we just wait. We wait too late, right? And not saying that waiting too late, there's no hope. No. It's not, there's no hope. But it requires a whole lot more work than it had to. Right? Right? I'm gonna get in trouble now, and I'm gonna say this to y'all, and I'm gonna get in trouble because I'm gonna show you how vulnerable I am, right? Okay, so I'm always rushing to get somewhere. And so I tend to leave my home and I hop my tail on the interstate. I'm rushing to get somewhere. I get in the toll lane. I'm driving in the toll lane, and they take your license plate down. They do all of that, but I'm just driving. The bills come. Yes, the bills come. The bills come, and I throw them on the side. And then here comes now time to renew my tags. And I can't get my tags renewed because I owe this outstanding bill. Then I have to go ahead and rob Peter to pay Paul and pull together this money to go and pay something that I could have paid the month it was due. Come on, talk to me now. That's what I'm talking about. I have to work harder because I didn't take care of what I had to take care of. I hear what you're saying. I hear this, pretending it's not happening. Yeah, you can pretend, but it's real. It's real. Yeah, Barbara, the toll bill is paid. That's a past example, not current. Thank you. Yeah, the bill, yeah, it is paid, right? But I shouldn't have to work that hard. And that's what happens when we don't go to get the help we need. We wait think it'll go away, think it's not going to happen. And then not only that, we wait, but while we're waiting, we're still connecting. Talk to me. And while we're waiting and still connecting, we're transmitting. Yep. Yep. Yeah, you're right. 25 more for $1 fee. Absolutely. Just giving money away. Right? But yeah, so that was past. That's not present. That's my past reality. Right? So anyway, thank y'all. We'll come back. Maybe we'll come back the week of Easter. I said we're taking a break. We'll come back the week of Easter and we'll finish up part 2 of this. And then we'll go to a new series that I will introduce next week. So what I said earlier, forget about it. We are going to have Bible study the week of Easter Monday. We'll have Bible study on Wednesday night. We'll do part 2 of this study on Black sexuality and HIV. We'll do this because it's important. Listen, I love y'all. Thank y'all. And thank y'all for the affirmation that I get from you all. And I'm serious, right? I know it is so easy for you to have friends who go to Bible study and they're talking about how to get saved. Yeah. How to get a breakthrough. Yeah. How to do praise right. But that's not me. Okay. I believe in salvation. I believe in all of that. Right. But the stuff we're facing in our community, the stuff we deal with on the regular, it requires more than cotton candy teaching. We got to get down beneath the surface and pull some stuff up and deal with it. I love y'all. Thank God for you. I thank God for y'all. I'll see y'all next week. Not next week, because next week we have Holy Week. Listen, I'm going to figure this out. I don't know. Maybe we should have Bible study next Wednesday night. That'd be easier, wouldn't it? So, Dr. Dix, let's just have Bible study next Wednesday night because it's still Holy Week. I'll do this. And then Easter week, we'll take a break. Don't worry about me. I got excited. Listen, I love y'all. Take care. God loves you. And so do I.